And away we go. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Consiglieres show. I think the S is silent, but my mouth can't seem to do that silently. We're starting a few minutes early because there's so much news going on tonight, and we have Bill Farley coming. We're going to talk the actual numbers, financial, based around North Carolina's possible move in the future if they can get away from North Carolina State. We're going to talk some politics, so that should be really fun. I'm your host, Nathan Bomber Brown. Yes, Bomber was a nickname my family gave me, so we'll go with that. And then I have Rock and Rant with me tonight on the Consigliere show. How we doing?
We're doing good. What a nutso day. Everyone predicted this
Absolutely.
week was going to be crazy in this space, and I think crazy said, "Hold my beer." It's just even going further than I think some of us thought of, and if others will chime in that we probably haven't even seen the end of it. So
Yeah, I think what did Churchill say? It's not the beginning of the end, but it might be the end of the beginning. We're almost there. There's only one other lawsuit that's going on in Colorado right now, having to do with a player and possibly, getting money paid to them, NIL or otherwise. That for some reason the judge didn't want to roll in to the House settlement, but. Big news today. The House settlement came out. There's a few other lawsuits associated with that. And boy, I couldn't think of a better way to go. So I just figured we start a few minutes early. For those that are here early, I want to thank you for being here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Make sure you're following us both on Twitter. Turn on those notifications on YouTube and Twitter so that you know when our shows are going to come around next. And just, consider just doing everything you can to stay close to the College Football Mafia Network. That includes Big 12 Mafia. That includes Mowing After Dark, the Consigliere Show, the Big Freaking Fridays. Lots of brands, but it's just about everybody getting together and having some fun. So we really appreciate everybody for being here tonight on a Thursday. Special day because we didn't do one yesterday. I wanted to see if the news broke a little bit. So that's where we are tonight. Before we jump into everything, why don't you go ahead and give us your top of mind, Rock? You've been tracking this news just like everybody else has for months. What's the thing that jumps out to you most about this latest settlement?
for me personally, and it's probably the one thing I keep bringing up, and I'm sure the powers that be and the lawyers, of course, thought of this, but with all of the reporting and the settlement talk and the revenue sharing dollars being out there, I still am waiting to hear how players of the future are bound by any of this without congressional legislation or collective bargaining. It's
Right.
like the one thing I still don't see that in all the answers that are coming to us, good or bad, that I haven't seen. And again, it's not me being so profoundly thoughtful about it. It's just
Right.
that's the question that sticks with me that a lot of people have asked, and looking forward to seeing if we find out anything more about that or not, or if that leads to opt-outs to the case in Colorado as an example, all of those machinations of it altogether.
Absolutely, and there is no congressional oversight or antitrust involved with this, meaning that lawsuit could come from 100 more players in the next 2 weeks. Nothing's stopping them from suing. So without that congressional sort of oversight and protection, an umbrella, if you will, it could continue to happen. Right now, college football, especially the autonomous leagues, that would be the Pac-12, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, and did I say Big 12? Um, all those five conferences, power conferences, if you will, in basketball, they're celebrating this. They couldn't approve this thing fast enough. The last to do it was the Pac-12. I'll read the official statement now that all the autonomous leagues have signed. But between that and the NCAA signing on, this is something that they're really hoping will sort of alleviate some of the pressure on the legal side, protecting these athletes and getting money from the universities. Does that sound all encompassing enough to you? Do you think there's a huge risk with putting this out there, getting it done really quick, Rock, but not having that oversight already approved?
I personally think there's a huge risk because there's not been one moment of this journey over the last several years that hasn't taken a turn that maybe some expected, but others didn't. Perhaps in the background, the lobbyists are going to town, and there's a lot more stuff that is going to be revealed that we're not aware of. And in hindsight, it will look like they had it buttoned up. But, NCAA and buttoned up are just not words that go together very well in my lexicon. So call me a skeptic, just like I'm a skeptic on the DOJ going after Ticketmaster after watching that movie 4 or 5 times over the years too, to use another hated institution that's in the law. Like, maybe they'll get it right this time. They also, 10 years ago made Ticketmaster give licensing over to others and divest of companies, yet here we are again. And for some reason in my head, those just connect buying tickets for concerts, for football games, hated organizations and lawsuits, and we'll see what happens, I guess.
The most important thing, and it's funny, I put the reader down below us, and it doesn't have a Thursday night show on it, so everybody's going to go, "What's that date?" and what's that time? But I completely agree with you, and I think that in an election year, the chances anything gets passed this year, there are a lot of people out there taking odds for whether Congress could approve something to help protect college football is really all they really care about at this point. From lawsuits is, some are saying it's 50-50. Some are saying for sure it'll get done. I'm on the other side of that. I think maybe it's a 5% chance it gets done just because it's an election year. Right? People aren't voting college football in the Senate right now. They're trying to get reelected, and they're trying to find ways to screw us of all our money. So protecting college football is not at the top of their mind.
Right. I would, could I imagine there being a hearing in the right state with the right person? Sure. It's a performative politics Super Bowl time, right?
Right.
But that doesn't necessarily lead to actual action, and it doesn't matter whether you have millions of dollars going into lobbying. Again, that could totally happen, and I'll be wrong, and I'll take the L on that one, to quote a lot of us. But I am definitely, if you give me $100 of Bombers money, I'm definitely putting it on. There's nothing going down in legislation, specifically before enforcement or enactment of these settlements go into play. I don't necessarily doubt in the future as a, sort of a the ramifications of these come together, that could happen, but I'm definitely not on board with Team Congress beforehand.
Yeah, I think it's something that we'll just have to keep watching. Like everything else in this new era of college sports, day to day, there's changes. It seems like there's not a day that goes by now we don't get some headline or some little tidbit about maybe a university wanting to change their conference, or a student that wants more access. We still haven't settled the idea of the collective bargaining, and players being an employee or maybe a contractor. Right? These are all open questions that we got a long way to go to settle them. And I've been telling people since we started doing the show, you and I, that I don't think there's ever going to stop at this point. I think college is big enough now, in my opinion. They are just going to keep going and getting bigger and bigger. And the more they do that, the more people are going to have their hand out wanting to get money.
Yeah, there's, and these things tend to go from one extreme to the other, right? You just think about the possibilities of all this consolidation happening. Next to me, now you have your cable package, and then all of a sudden everybody's cutting the cord and unplugging, and now you're going back to the other extreme of, well, here's a Netflix and Comcast bundle. So
right,
exactly, like who knows where it's all going to play out. It'll be super interesting to figure that out as we go.
Look at this man. He's 5 minutes early. How you doing, Bill? Can you hear me? Your audio's not working?
See, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you.
Bill, can you hear me?
No. Okay. Let's see. I don't know how to tell him. Go to settings. Can't hear me.
Chat.
Just type to him in the back chat while I'm talking. Can you do that, Rock?
Mm-hmm.
Try to walk him through troubleshooting that. All right, while we're doing this live troubleshooting, everybody's got a live love TV, right? We're going to get a few things out of the way. First of all, let me start with shout outs for people that were here early. And I just appreciate everybody being here on a Thursday night. You keep going, Rock. Can you see it?
Yes.
He's typing, right? All right. Yeah, tell him to go to the settings and check his audio. Anyway, let's get some shout outs for the people that are already here. First guy in the house was Dan Miter. How you doing, Dan? He's one of our members. Says, wow, the news in college sports just keeps on giving. That's absolutely true. Illini Ted's in here. He says, there is no more downtime in college football. You're exactly right. Just like the offseason for the NFL, there is no offseason. Stephen Vitt says, stopping by for a bit tonight. Glad to have you here on a special Thursday night, Stephen. I really appreciate you being here. Let's see here. Don in Kansas. Another member says, howdy, guys. How you doing? Good to see you. Buckshot Kid says, oh, hey, at the College Football Mafia. Thank you, Buckshot. I appreciate it. Daniel Gygax in the house. Another member says, hey, everyone. Let's see here. Sky. Sky, good to have you here. It's been a minute since I've seen you. Hi, everyone. Bob Swinger, another member. These are all members. You guys make me feel so good that you're members. I really appreciate it. Bob Swinger says, good evening, everyone. Good to have you here, Bob. RT, another member, says, good evening, all. I'm really impressed by how many people are here on a crazy Thursday. Daniel Gygax, no way Congress takes up an antitrust bill for the NCAA. Major League Baseball's antitrust exemption is in court now. It's going to take a while. You're exactly right, Daniel. I totally agree. I think Bomber is an R. Don in Kansas said that. I'm an R. What does that mean, Rock? What does being an R mean?
I can only think of a topic that I wouldn't want us to get into.
Okay, then don't. It's possible that he's talking about R in my neighborhood is Richland. That's the town I grew up in. It's Richland Bombers. So I don't know if that's
there
what
we
you
go.
mean.
There we
got
go.
It?
Hey.
You got it, Bill?
Yeah.
All right. I'm just doing some shout outs and then we'll get right to the news, okay?
What's the news?
I just said, let me get some shout outs to some people and then we can talk about the news.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Ed Wayner says, hi, gentlemen. I think FSU and ACC will settle for $250 million. If they settle for $250 million or less, in my opinion, the ACC is a dead conference, just going to take a while. But I could be wrong. A lot of people think if it's 200 or more, that's enough money to keep the conference going. Really just depends how badly they want to stay together, even if it means maybe at less dollars. We'll have to see, though. Dan Miter says, just think the NCAA could have paid players $6,000 less than 5 years ago, but chose to kick it down the road. Now it's $20 million per school. We're going to talk about that amount, Dan. Believe me. Terry Kane says we have a Kane on the show. Go Rock. I love that very much. Go Rock. Stephen Vitt says I got $200 million as the FSU ACC settlement figure. Okay, that's less than the 250 I just said. And then Buckshot Kid says, I appreciate you having shows I like. Well, thank you, Buckshot. We appreciate it. All right. Let's get to the guy everybody's come to see. They don't want to see me. They don't want to see Rock. Well, maybe they want to see Rock. He's better looking than I am. But it's Bill Farley. How we doing, Bill?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Well, of course. You bet. I tracked I always track all of your tweets. And yesterday you put out a couple that you did out a first one, and then you followed it up with a second one. And I loved both of them. So I thought it might be an opportunity for us to sort of talk about, and you can kind of walk us through how you see some of the business and money side stuff is going to work for North Carolina, thrown in with some of their politics.
Sure. And so the North Carolina politics, I'm going to be kind of generic just about politics around hotel tax. And
Okay.
just as way as background. Yeah. Hotel Carolina. Yeah. So, in my professional career, I worked in public finance, and I also taught public finance at USC in the graduate school. And I worked in economic development. And hotel tax to us in local government was just the absolute best revenue source because it really came with no services required. You have visitors come into a hotel, they spend money, they don't get in trouble typically. and you're already collecting property taxes from that hotel. You're collecting sales tax from their purchases. So they're already providing the kind of tax base that a normal resident is. And so the hotel tax is just on top of that. And
Okay.
a lot of states require that money be used for promotion and promoting tourism.
Okay.
So, so I come with that as a background. Also, I did a couple hotel developments when I was in the private sector, so I understand the kind of the basic mechanics of hotel financing. In my PhD studies, my dissertation was published in 2021. My dissertation was on hotel taxes,
Okay.
it's tourism taxes. And what I was looking at, and what a lot of economists have looked at, is that when you have a real nice place, nice beaches, hills, town that has a lot of nice assets, local governments and states can tax those type of communities because their people are sticky. They don't want to leave.
Right.
So studies have shown that in those kind of locations, people taxes are higher, and that money eventually goes to the local governments, and they use it called feather bedding, or they use it for raising salaries and creating kind of a large bureaucracy.
Okay.
So hotel taxes have kind of been a source of communities and also enriching themselves and enriching and enlarging bureaucracies. And that was my dissertation. I looked specifically at hotel taxes and how communities enrich themselves with hotel taxes and raise their budgets and their staff sizes and things like that.
Okay.
So in terms of the ACC,
Right.
I had seen, I've been following along a little bit. I noticed, 6 months ago or so, whenever they did the change where universities could not unilaterally leave the conference. And that's something that has kind of been, other universities have looked at that same issue. And I know there's been some discussion of them tying together North Carolina State and UNC if they both go. But they passed that legislation to kind of take that away. And that I think that emanates from UCLA just kind of picking up and leaving. And that resulted in the calimony payment to Cal, because Cal was left behind. They're in the same system.
Yeah, let's really quick. Let's set the table so everybody knows. We're talking about UCLA, and then California is getting $10 million a year, right?
From their increase in revenue from the Big Ten. So from that kind of communication issues between universities and the system, I think North Carolina saw that, and they made the same move.
Okay.
So then the ACC, the incentive that was given to the conference, the $15 million.
Yeah. Can I talk through your tweets?
Sure.
We do that? All right, let's do that. Give me a second. We'll bring it up, and we'll actually go through both of them, and then you can explain to us kind of what's actually going on behind the scenes.
Sure.
All right. First one is we're going to start with, and let me get this bigger here. First tweet says, I just received the contract between North Carolina's Department of Commerce and the ACC. By the way, this is Bill's tweet, so he's the source for this. The state is paying the ACC $15 million. So let's say that again. The state of North Carolina is paying the ACC $15 million in exchange for conducting 67 conference championships in the Tar Heel State. Pulling other documents, it appears ESPN and Fox cash waived at UNC may be trumped by the economic multipliers attached to sports tourist spending. And then you attach the comments. So just that, I obviously have your second tweet here too, but that's what you were talking about, right? This is what you're talking about with the money is $15 million is actually not going to sports necessarily. It's going to the ACC to then put on those sports. Is that right?
No, so that's just going to the conference, and I think they use that for their relocation they move cities, and I think they use that to help with that move.
Oh, okay.
And then in exchange for that, they agreed to have all these conference championships. And so I saw that. I had seen that story, and I had tweeted about that months ago, but I didn't see the actual document. And I'm always I like to have that, kind of be open source analysis. I want people to see the same things I'm seeing. So I put the request in, I got the document, I looked at it. And so I just started poking around for some other documents, looking at their state budget. They've got about 800 million, almost $1 billion for economic development. And I noticed that they had also put aside 25 million to chase after the World University Games. And they bid on 2027. They were successful on 2029. And just kind of looking through the activity in that economic development fund, it seemed tourism heavy. I think they're probably bringing in anywhere from $200 to $300 million a year in tourism taxes in North Carolina, and they use that for generating more tourism activity.
Okay.
So they chased after this World University Games. They were successful in getting it.
Yeah,
And
I can read those. I can read those numbers.
Sure.
If you want me to, let's do that. I'll bring up your second tweet. It's great when everybody can see these. Let me get rid of this comment here really quick. Sorry. All right. This is the second tweet that followed up the other one we were just talking about. It says, summary of my thoughts on UNC's unique situation in realignment discussions. 1, North Carolina set aside nearly $1 billion this year to promote sports tourism and economic development. That's the state of North Carolina.
Correct.
2, investments include $15 million to the ACC events, or to host ACC events, and $25 million to win the World University Summer Games of 2029. You just explained that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The ACC provides North Carolina a source to host multiple events that attract fans in the state. So that's the tourism you're talking about.
Correct.
Okay. North Carolina is home to 4 ACC schools: UNC, NC State, Wake Forest, and Duke. Our Duke is private school, right?
Right.
Is Wake a state school?
No, they're. I believe they're private, but I'm not.
Wake is private. Wake is private.
It is? Okay, so they have 2 public and 2 private that are in the state that are all in the ACC right now. Politicians, which is what everybody loves to hear when we talk North Carolina, says politicians in North Carolina are likely opposed to the optics of North Carolina University's playing for the Big Ten or SEC conference championships in Indianapolis or Atlanta, towns that compete with North Carolina for sports tourism. So they're worried they're going to lose money because they're going to be playing these games out of state.
Yeah, and that's my interpretation, having worked in local politics and kind of knowing how politicians view these things.
Okay.
Indianapolis has been promoting sports tourism for as long as I've been in the business, probably 30 years or so.
Okay.
And I think, Atlanta went after the Olympics, and they're hosting the SEC tournament games or football championship. And so there's definitely a handful of places that are actively pursuing sports tourism at a really high level. Everybody's pursuing, soccer, traveling soccer teams and volleyball teams, and
right.
People are competing for those, those all the time on the local level. But in terms of at a national level, a national scope, there's just a few cities and states that are really going after these big mega tournaments. So that's my perception, is that if you're in that game and you're competing for international sports competitions,
right,
the thought of having your university go to Indianapolis to play in championship games has got to be a terrible issue in terms of optics for politicians. And putting this in the scope of that, they've got nearly $1 billion for economic development. They have the resources to try to keep things afloat, or even the playing field with UNC and the media revenue pieces that are advantage to the SEC and the Big Ten.
Okay. The last 2 you have on here are just 5% of the state's economic development budget could address the financial gap between UNC to the SEC or the Big Ten. So you're saying just having 5% of that additional income would make up the difference between what they're currently getting, about 30, with everything, they're about 43, 44 million. And you're saying if they were to make 70 or 80, that still would be only 5 or 10% of that total amount for the year, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah. And I think, if you look at if this ACC imploded and those 4 universities went all their separate ways and there were no longer these interstate rivalries, the amount of visitors that are moving around the state, staying in hotels is going to drop off dramatically. So they've got a really good situation now. They've got 4 schools in North Carolina, in the ACC. So they're getting most of the away games
right.
are coming into North Carolina. So they're getting those visitors. And, who knows if they were to split off, if they're going to have the same interest in terms of people traveling to those games. They've got a great asset in place. It's probably less money to keep it in place, invest in it, retain it. And that's something in economic development you always think about. It's easier to retain a business than get somebody new to come in.
Right. Yeah.
So to try to grow sports tourism around 3 or 4 different new conferences that might splinter up, if the ACC were implode, seems to me if I were a political, if I was advising, if I was in the finance department of the state, I'd be crunching numbers, trying to show a way that you could try to keep them in the fold. So,
Rock, I know you have a question. I just wanted to finish this by saying your statement is UNC stays in the ACC. So taking all those things, you're thinking North Carolina stays where they're at.
Yeah, I think there's too much to risk for North Carolina politicians to let them go. So I don't see it, but if they break, I just don't see the benefit of North Carolina the state,
right?
Given that they've got such a nice asset and so many games from the ACC and the conference championships, to let that all go so that UNC can play in Indianapolis and Ann Arbor.
Okay.
I just don't see that.
Go ahead, Rock.
So there's so many different ways that you could take all of what you've given out there, and I'm going to try to initially keep it relatively simple in a space that is not simple at all. So before we go into the World Games and events that you might be attracting international, right, which has a lot of other factors potentially coming in, just in addition to you don't want UNC to have the optics of going to Indianapolis, but couldn't you make the argument on the first one of the comments you made that yes, you would lose NC State playing Wake Forest if they didn't go to a game, but the flip side might be those aren't really huge. They might be huge local travel games, but you could drive back and forth to Wake Forest in a day. Versus if UNC and NC State, as an example, went to a bigger conference and 10 states of the world were coming in regularly, and Ohio States and those other schools. How do you go about looking at that from the seat and the advantage and experience that you have versus keeping all of that within the state, and a lot of that's interstate travel? That'd be like my first question back to you and the devil's advocate side of the equation.
Yeah, so I haven't really run like a matrix of those. We've got the 4 schools. They've got the other 8 or so schools that are coming in here, versus, and then there would be the 4 that would be playing football games and basketball games internally, and not perhaps using hotel nights. I haven't done that kind of matrix, but the status quo is safe, and you could. I could probably put together a projection that said, well, that you might be able to get equal, but you just don't know. So, I would take the position that it's best to just stay with the status quo. You've got hotels, particularly on the weekends, in these urban settings where the football stadiums are. Those are the toughest nights to fill, and I think they are filling a lot of those nights even with the local games. So I would have to do, that would be a study you could do, and you could do some projections, maybe borrowing from what other teams' experiences are. But say North Carolina State gets left out, Wake Forest, what conference are they going to be in? You might be able to make a good case for UNC that they're going to still travel, but you don't know what the other folks are going to do. I think about Oregon State and their schedule. They ended up with a Mountain West heavy schedule. it's very difficult out there to kind of travel and from all those small towns to get to Corvallis or get to Pullman. So,
Well,
and
yeah, those are 2-lane highways. I've driven all of them.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know exactly what they are.
yeah. So if you get it, if you get in a mix with schools like that,
Right.
so you almost have to know, kind of game plan what you think your conference is going to look like afterwards.
So
Right.
And I haven't given that piece much thought. I don't know where a Duke and Wake Forest, where they end up if they're out of the ACC.
Rock, go ahead. You can follow up.
Yeah, I guess the other two main things that come when we talk about it, and hopefully my sound's a little bit better, is the reverse of that is what is all that worth within the state if you lose Florida State, Clemson, Miami as an example,
Yeah.
knowing you're likely to replace them with lesser, and then how would you go about valuing something like the Big Ten Academic Alliance and what the ACC is clearly a prestigious conference, but that Big Ten Academic Alliance and additional research that might come in, like how do you go about valuing that when you're looking at the entire pie? Is it even possible because you're projecting things you don't know for sure will happen?
Yeah, so I'll take the AAU, that Academic Alliance first. I have not seen it. I went, my PhD studies were fairly recent at VCU. It's an R1 university, and they have a pretty good research base. I don't see that AAU thing seems to me to more like a club where you've got university presidents that want to associate with each other because for career purposes.
Right.
It's almost like they want to be in like universities in case
it's like having a vanity plate. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so I haven't seen any evidence the AAU. I've seen some studies that, like for example, I saw one study where Oregon State versus Oregon. Oregon's in the AAU, but Oregon State meets more criteria and has more research than Oregon, but they're not in the club. And the alliance doesn't seem to be helping Oregon in terms of their research. I think they spend more on athletics and research. So I don't know that on the alliance piece and the research, I don't think that really is a factor. I think that's something that is more of a club that they like to talk to each other, and it's for career purposes. So I'm not high on the whole AAU.
Yeah, and I might have misspoken, Bill. I meant more the Big Ten Academic Alliance, the consortium of the
not the
schools in the
AAU.
campus, as opposed to the AAU, which they're all a part of, which I've heard of, and people have alluded to the value of that and what it can bring. There are people who have argued that it brings a lot, and then there's people at certain schools that feel like they got nothing out of it when they join. Like I've heard people from Nebraska say that. I don't know if it's factually true. Just
my sense when the professors that I worked with and the context that I had, we had several departments. We worked with a medical school. It was public policy, but we had relationships with urban planning, and getting research grants is very competitive and very from my vantage point, the professors are very protective of their grants. There's not a lot of collaboration, particularly in the early years of people's careers, because they want to get tenure. And I just didn't see a lot of that collaboration to try to get grants with other universities. I saw a lot of just people, national actors looking for grants on their own. And I never saw the collaboration piece as being of value. So, but I'm not an expert in that one, but it never rang true to me when I heard that discussion, just from my being in a PhD program for 4 years and observing. You get as a PhD student, you do get to sit on committees. You do get some exposure to what kind of the workings of the university and how they go after grants. And I just never saw that. Never popped up as a piece.
So let's get back to the sports part of it, because I know we can get lost in the numbers.
There was one other question you had, I think.
Oh, Rock, you had another question?
Was there two questions that I only answered one? There was one. I think
it was just it was the reverse of those schools in the state. But what happens to the value of all this economic development if you lose Florida State and Clemson? Like how do they go about figuring out that risk where everybody stays together, but everything's so greatly devalued that when you're losing prime properties like that are not going to be sending people to the state and are replaced by lesser schools, and the economic impact of that.
So
that might make them change their decision about keeping UNC stuck in the ACC.
Yeah, so you could get to each county that records their hotel receipts would know on what weekends they got certain receipts. That's not something I would have access to, because at the state level it just grossed up to a total year. But a county could look at that and try to pinpoint what the additive value of the different schools were, in terms of maybe you could just do a proxy, do ticket sales from different visiting schools and see who used their ticket allotments. So that might be a way to get to that number, to see. Of course, those could be local folks. That'd be hard data to get to unless you're in the local government and you're making the case.
So I'm going to walk away from some of this financial stuff, because I think the money matters, but we're talking about top end college sports.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern, if I was a UNC grad or a North Carolina State grad, is we stay in a conference that's a lot diminished by Clemson and Florida State leaving. And the perception is now you're in a lesser than conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
We already saw an undefeated Florida State who had been ranked in the top 5 for several weeks. They drop out of the top 4 at the end of the year by perception. It wasn't by anything they did on the field. They won all their games.
Yeah.
But their perception was that the league was weak, and they're going to do better by bringing in a school that maybe is a little, tarnished, but is a tougher program. So I just from a practical standpoint, if you're North Carolina Board of Trustees and you have a choice of splitting up your 2 prized assets, losing some money at the gate, but you're now playing in the upper echelons of the sport, that perception part of it, I think, in a lot of ways, I know the money is something, but to me, it's almost like I think the perception and the brand value being associated with those larger conferences would carry the day. I'm a fan, though, right? I don't look at the numbers like you do. I'm just trying from a perception standpoint. You would really have to work and try to convince me that wouldn't happen. What do you think?
Well, I think, like, you take a Virginia Tech, they're going to sell out all their games.
Right.
They're going to fill up all their hotels in that community, whatever conference they're in. They're going to do that. So I think you'd have to look at your school and look at your attendance and see if it's sensitive, because we're not talking about media value here. We're not talking about
right.
We're just talking about filling hotel rooms and the multiplier effect of all these people coming in and spending money,
right,
and how that drives the local economies and fills in the gaps of the hotel occupancy during the and that money, I think, is equal to or greater than the media revenue piece that they would be losing.
Okay.
Or at least it'd be in their order of magnitude, be close. So if they have access to the playoff,
right.
I guess you could potentially, if you're in the top, where the conference, you could get a home game to start.
Right. To win the ACC, you get that home game. You bet.
So you would have that. You still have that window or opportunity to get that, whether
right.
You don't have the 2 or 3 slots, but I think, did they go with us? I can't remember if they went with the slots or not.
The winners, the 4 winners of the strongest conferences are 1 through 4 seeds in the playoff.
And they drop the whole, you get 2 slots, you get 3 slots.
Yeah, those aren't guaranteed. Yeah. It's just open. I think the number's 9.
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, they changed the money. They did the money allocation, but they didn't.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay.
So there's, and this is this disconnect we have as fans, because we can fill the stadiums. We love our tailgaters. We love going to the game, and we sell them out.
Right.
But that isn't good enough. You've got to have the brand values. Yeah. Some people, 5 states away are going to turn in and leave the television on.
Right.
While they're cooking dinner. And that's what's driving the media revenue. So in terms of the activity and bringing in people to the games, that's a different evaluation or analysis than the media piece of it. And I think you still would have if you're selling out games, like a Virginia Tech and West Virginia, they're gonna always be selling out their games. And
Right.
I don't know the particulars of North Carolina State nor if they're sensitive to competition or not. But you could also bolster your non-conference schedule.
Sure.
There's ways to rebalance it. And Oregon and Oregon State, Iowa State, they've kept their rivalry games even though they're not in the same conferences.
Right.
Those are huge economic engines. I don't know if there's an appetite for anybody to do the same with North Carolina.
Rock, do you have a question? I wanted to get to some
I just
comments.
have a take, Obama. I
Go
totally
ahead.
get when you wanted to move off of like the deep numbers, but I think the board.
Well, I just think we start to lose people a little bit.
No,
That's all I'm
I
saying.
don't know. I mean, all these people are like in the weeds with us to a degree, but I never wanted to read the ACC bylaws a year and a half ago either, right?
That's true. Fair.
And
That's fair.
And we've all had to do our own version of our personal insanity into this entire story. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if, Bill might have, because his focus and specialty, and he knows his things, and he's got a doctorate in this world, right?
Right.
But we wouldn't be having this conversation probably if we all didn't watch Board of Governors versus Board of Trustees and matches.
Right.
And all of a sudden we had to worry about local politics.
Right.
And if the local politics are such that the state representative from Asheville, North Carolina, is worried about things that could potentially cause influence in the system-wide stuff that causes UNC or NC State to make a decision on the things we do care about. And that's just kind of the premise that we go off of. The tourism could impact what happens with UNC, not just whether they want to go to the Big Ten or SEC. That's the only reason, just to get that baseline understanding where Bill is coming from. Yeah. Ultimately, just to figure out, like for me, selfishly, I want to know if UNC is going wherever they're going to go, because they could directly impact where somebody like Miami goes in a pecking order, if at all.
Right.
And I'm sure a lot of other people have that same sort of take. So I definitely didn't want to get into the weeds, but that was why I was asking that question. So
no,
I think
the questions are fine. I don't think that's the thing. I want to balance the really in-depth, nitty-gritty questions with other ones that are kind of higher end. That's all.
I think those are the kind of questions that help me think about what other data could I get to kind of answer those questions. So just
very fair.
Through it,
very fair.
The proxy of having away game visitor allotments, comparing the attendance of games with different competition to see how sensitive fans were in each of these locations in North Carolina to who they play. That might get to the answer in terms of is this going to be a net neutral, net positive, net negative based on the reformation, the change of the conference makeup. So those are good questions.
All right, very good. I appreciate.
I'm looking at it kind of from a top line.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm looking at just from my political experience and how politicians think, and just that hotel tax is just gravy for state and local governments, and they've been chasing it. They've been successful, and they've cut deals for it, so it's top of mind for them. And to let it go, I'm not seeing why they would let it go. But maybe some of the questions you raised, if I look at that data, maybe it's in there somewhere. But
I think we just have to get in our heads that it's not all about the bottom line, dollars and cents. The media value matters, right? It's a bragging right. It gives you extra cash so that you can spend on whatever facilities, people, whatever you want to do with it. That obviously matters. Now, I'm not saying money isn't important. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking, right? Because your article's all driven around that, and I realize that. What I'm saying is, from the outside looking in, and we're not in North Carolina politics, I can see where there would be this bipolarism going on, where North Carolina, it now kind of seems, last week they tried to sort of sneak something by in a board of trustees meeting, and not doing it because they were sued by David McKenzie, right, to stop the process. And now we come a week later and stuff's starting to filter out from North Carolina government that said, yeah, they actually were going to probably try to do exactly like Florida State did. So if that's the case, in my mind, there has to be a reason. Or you explained the dollars and cents and losing the revenue for taxes, obviously that's huge. Talking hundreds of millions of dollars, not $10 million.
Yeah.
I just think at the end of the day, I don't think it's about writing a check. I think it's about wanting your school to have the bragging rights to be in the top 2 conferences in the world. But that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah, that's right now they've got a lot of pride in their state and having the headquarters of the ACC and all the conference championships, and that would all go away, I think, if you
right
go up the conference. So which is better, playing Michigan and Ohio State, or having all this tourism, sports tourism and activity in your state and the headquarters. I still think my sense is, and this is getting off the topic of hotel tax, the new money that flows into the schools, the Big Ten, the SEC,
right,
it's not all going to go to football. There's still only
of course,
there's still only 30 or 40 5-stars and 300 4-stars and
right,
a whole bunch of 3-stars, and the allocation of those athletes across the top 60 or 70 programs is going to remain relatively the same. There'll be some transfer portal issues, but in terms of the access to players, it's not changing much. I think what's going to happen is the Olympic sports, people are going to be able to afford 4 Olympic sports or
right.
30 Olympic sports. So Ohio State's going to have their 30, going to have their rifle team, and Oregon State might just have basketball, soccer, wrestling, and gymnastics.
Yeah, BYU is going to be the same way. Or they cover like 39 or 40 sports, men's and women's.
Yeah,
I don't think they're going to be able to keep. A lot of those are going to go club, in my opinion.
Because everybody can keep their football team afloat,
right,
and be competitive just as they are now.
Yeah.
The transfer rule is still tricky because you pick, you end up having that bottom half of the top 60 are going to be feeding the top half with players that are, sophomores and juniors that are transferring. But
right,
you're still going to have breakout seasons for some of those folks that are below the midline, with great coaching and great team chemistry. You're still going to have some people popping up. Oregon State has no business being the top 20, but they occasionally, every 10, 20 years, they pop up in the top 20 because they get a combination of great coaching,
right,
great chemistry, and they pop up.
Yeah,
So,
I think a lot do that.
Yeah.
Rock, did you have another question?
No, I think it's going to be interesting on the politics level too, and I don't think they'll win, but at some point when the inevitable hammer starts falling and school teams like we're talking about and the other sports start to get knocked down to club level, I'm not sure what planet everyone thinks we're living on lately, but those students and those people, their supporters, are not just going to sit there and go okay on the sidelines about it. They may not ultimately win, but there's going to be a different level of politics about, hey, so wait, we got $40 more million into the program, and now we're cutting more sports, but we're not cutting anything in football except for walk-ons. Another downstream thing that we don't really know how it will play out. In some schools, it may matter a lot. Other schools, they might not really care, but in some form, it's going to surface up to the same politicians we're talking about.
Well, I might be wrong.
Well, I think
might be wrong.
I think the top 20 or 30 programs are going to keep everything because they got that cap, which is great for them, because Ohio State should be paying $70, $80 million if you take 20% of their revenue sources, but they're getting capped at 20.
Yeah, can we bring that up? Let me bring that article up, actually. So
Plus
everybody
30,
knows what?
With the 30 plus the settlement, right? Plus roughly 30 million or so a year.
No, I think we're talking about 2 different things. We're talking about 2 different things, I think.
I'm talking about the 2 things together about like their revenue, whatever they're having. They're gonna be having 2 new pools of money going out.
The settlement
I'm only talking about the settlement dollars that they say they can share with the players.
Yeah, the settlement got knocked way down. So it's
let me look at this. Let me bring this article up. So this is and I might be talking about something different, Rock, so you correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to put this link over here. So this is from ESPN. Make sure we always give credit where credit's due. Here's the link to this article. I think it's Pete Thamel and Dan Murphy. It is. It's these two paragraphs right here. It says the NCAA and its leagues are planning, sorry, I'm going to highlight it, are planning to alert plaintiffs' attorneys Thursday that they are prepared to move forward with a multi-billion-dollar agreement. That agreement has been signed, approved, and I've got the statement that came out from all the A5 conferences on what that means, but let me get to that in a second. It says we're like Thursday that they are prepared to move forward with a multi-billion-dollar agreement to settle 3 pending federal antitrust cases. The NCAA will pay more than $2.7 billion in damages over 10 years to past and current athletes, according to sources. Sources said the parties also have agreed to a revenue-sharing plan, allowing each school to share up to roughly $20 million per year with players, athletes. It says.
Yeah, and that the damages piece has been knocked way down because the NCAA is picking up about half of that, and then they're spreading out the other half.
Right, the 60 and 40.
Yeah,
breakdown,
so it's only a couple $1 million a year. That number was going to be
Right,
30.
but it's over 10 years. So that's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay.
Whether it's 2 million times 10, 3 million times
Yeah,
10, for whatever
gotcha.
the school is. Plus,
Gotcha.
you're now sharing $20 million per year for revenue share going forward. So instantly, let's just say it's $2 million a year retro year. For 10 years, there's 40 million of new expenses, 20 million to pay for a settlement, 20 million you're taking from the revenue you got to pay students separate and aside from whatever else might be happening with kids getting NIL deals.
NIL is different. Yeah, I wanted to clarify that. So this 20 million, revenue sharing plan allowing each school to share up to roughly 20 million per year. There's no rule that says every school has to share that amount. They could keep all of it. They don't have to give players anything.
What's ironic, but it's maybe not a coincidence that this $20 million for SEC and Big Ten schools, they're getting an extra $20 million in the college football playoff revenue.
Right.
So they're neutral. They're gonna be able to keep their 35 teams. It's everybody else that is taking a haircut on the college playoff money. And then the $20 million to a lot of people, to Ohio State, that's, they could probably share 20% for them would be 60 million, but they're capped at 20 million. So
yeah, that's right.
And so the plaintiffs that wanted X amount of revenue sharing from the overall system, by capping it at 20 million, they really shifted most of the burden to the lower end schools, because the top end schools, if they would have set it at 10% and had no cap, it probably would have been more equitable for everybody. But the big universities got an advantage on that one.
We talked about that on Tuesday night, and I definitely think the little guys got screwed, but
yeah,
what can you do about it, right? Football drives the bus. Football's paying everybody's salaries. And basketball just isn't. So all those conferences that only play basketball, they're saying, well, without us, you wouldn't be anything. So take what we give you and don't complain, basically. Yeah. Let me read the settlement. This was produced and sent out after the Pac-12, which was the last conference to approve the settlement. This is by all 5 of the A5 conferences. This is a joint statement. It says, the 5 autonomy conferences and the NCAA agreeing to a settlement terms is an important step in the continuing reform of college sports that will provide benefits to student athletes and provide clarity in college athletics across all divisions for years to come. The settlement is also a roadmap for college sports leaders in Congress to ensure this unique American institution can continue to provide unmatched opportunity for millions of students. All of Division I made today's progress possible, and we all have work to do to implement in terms of the agreement. We look forward to working with our various student athlete leadership groups. Okay, so if we just take that at face value, what did that say to you, Rock? You're laughing.
We look forward to doing X, but Congress, please save us. Like, give me a break. That's what I read, right? Like, we look forward to working together. It's like, we can't, and therefore we want to help save us from ourselves, so we can once again try to restrict players, money, because we don't like that they got it because they're too young. But everybody else, capitalism, go.
Right. What do you think about that, Bill? The fact that Congress is they're not riding a white horse, as far as I can tell, especially in an election year.
Yeah.
This is risky without cover from the U.S. Congress, isn't it?
Right. And you look at them. I mean, the Senate, you need 60% of the Senate to do anything.
Veto. Yep.
And if you look at just all the states that don't have any Power 5 football teams, and if they're feeling like their schools are getting screwed, if they think University of Montana got a raw deal, why are the senators from Montana and South Dakota and North Dakota and Idaho and on, you get to 40 pretty quick to block something like this. So the act of Congress used to be a humorous term. You'd say, we need an act of Congress, and it'd be like a joke.
Right.
These guys actually think they're going to get it. It's just
it is pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right, let's get off of this one, because that is now done as far as the settlements goes. Everybody signed it. Nobody's happy about it if you're below the A5, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, right. That's something this weekend I'm going to try. I've been working on, and I keep getting interrupted. Looking at a model, just taking 5 universities. I think I've got Kansas, Ohio State, Arkansas, Oregon State, one other that I'm looking. I'm just going to model this out to see what all this means for just taking those 5 universities. What's it means for their bottom line in terms of what they'd have to cut, or if they don't have to cut anything.
Right.
I wanted to do more, but as I got into some of the databases that have that information, I was finding some errors in the data as it was transposed from the financial reports into the data set. So I'm just going to stick with the five universities, and I'll run that out and do an article this weekend.
Let's run through some of these comments from people watching. By the way, we appreciate everybody watching. We've been going an hour now. Thank you very much for being here. Make sure you follow us all on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Turn on your notifications, and consider becoming a member of the Mafia family. In addition, if you'd like to make a comment, you want to make sure I read it, it'll have to be a super chat tonight. We don't have as much time as we normally do on some of our other shows. So super chat, we might get to some others. I've got a few that are flagged now, but I know that there's a lot of good thoughts out there. If you want to make sure we cover it, especially, I don't want to keep Bill past longer than he wants to go. Bill, you just put your hand up whenever you got to go, okay?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Let's get to some of these comments. First of all, from the Chad, they state the state of North Carolina can pay the exit fees since they want to keep the ACC alive. What do you think about that?
The exit fee for
to basically the money that would go back to them to keep the ACC alive.
See, I'm not following. I'm being thick here. I'm trying to.
I'm not either. The exit fees on behalf of who?
I was thinking on top of that would go to the ACC money.
State can pay the exit fees since they want to keep the ACC alive.
Maybe they're saying they North Carolina can put more money in to keep the conference going. I think we'll skip that one. Okay, we'll get back to that. If you guys think you have a better way to answer it, let's do it. How about this one? Sheep in Wolf's Clothing says the Board of Governors chair has stepped down. Bad thing is the assistant Board of Governors chair has stepped in. She married into a big Wolfpack donor family. She went to University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Yeah, the politics, Board of Governors, Board of Trustees. Is every Southeastern state this way? I need somebody to explain that to me.
I was only in Virginia for maybe 6 years. I didn't get to.
Rock, tell us what are we seeing here?
I mean, I think North Carolina might have been like, we want to rank number 1 in this based off of everything we can see, but we don't really know behind a lot of their states because their teams are already in the SEC and not having to worry about that. But yeah, it looks like it's Wolfpack backpacks for everyone.
Wolfpack backpack. I love it. Wolfpack backpack. Do you know what that is? I don't know if you've been following us at all, Bill, but Wild Ute came up with the term Wolfpack backpack, and that's saying if North Carolina goes, North Carolina State's going with them.
Oh, they're going with them.
So, and that means the other way too. It means if they don't go, North Carolina State's keeping them back. So
Yeah,
it goes both ways.
yeah. I did. I posted on my Substack some of the communications between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State when Oklahoma bolted.
Right.
And it was pretty hilarious the way Oklahoma, it's like, hey, we'd love to take you, but the money just doesn't work, and we love you, but see you later.
It's about right.
Yeah.
This is for you, Rock. Illini Ted says the Big Ten Academic Alliance is also a reason the Big Ten will not drop underperforming schools from the conference. That's what Moen's been saying forever. The Big Ten's not relegating. They're not getting rid of any schools.
Well, that would just, that means that they perceive, at least the schools within it, there's a value to them, right? That makes them want to keep Northwestern as the
Right.
Trojan horse example. What that means to them. So that's obviously, in theory, something they would sell to a prospective member about what they perceive that value of that partnership is. Whether that bears out in reality, Bill has that insight on it to some degree from what his program was, and I guess we'll find out in time with everybody else.
Well, I can tell you now that you have USC in the Big Ten, you will have a university squawking about even distribution of revenue. So USC was really big on uneven distribution. And so you could have a scenario where they go to uneven revenue distribution and the Northwesterns of the world stay in the conference, but they're getting, instead of getting, $60 million from the media contract, they're getting 20. So that, I know Texas is big on that. That'll probably come in. There'll be a cancer in the SEC, and SEC will definitely be raising their hand to change things here pretty quick.
Illini Ted, I appreciate your comment. Thank you very much. How about this one? Conundrum says, wait until the collective bargaining begins, Bill. So collective bargaining isn't in college football right now. The players aren't negotiating together. They're not in a union. They're certainly not employees. How do they answer that? That's the other sort of big matzo ball hanging out there, right?
Why would players want to cap Ohio State? Why would they want any cap? But particularly, why would they want to cap the biggest schools? That's where you're going to get the most money. So
right.
That's a good point. Yeah, there's so many moving parts here. To celebrate this settlement agreement just seems like a little overblown in terms of what we think is actually going to happen.
I think it was funny though that the Big 12 and ACC were the first to get it done right now. Like they could not wait to have this taken care of for them. Obviously, it took the other conferences and then the NCAA itself a little bit longer to approve that. Anyway, let's see here. Here, Timothy Green says, "I'm glad I wore my boots tonight because it's getting really deep in here." I'm not sure which part you're talking about, Timothy. You'll have to let us know in the comment section. But yeah, tell us specifically what you're thinking is getting deep. I'm not sure what he was talking about when he said this. It was about a half hour.
Profoundly intelligent conversation, the likes of which you find nowhere else.
Well, I everything is so focused on, you get the biggest media contract, you go to the biggest media conference, and that's all there is to it.
Right.
And I think UCLA, I think they're having second thoughts. They've got to give up a bunch of money. They've got travel costs. They're going to be an interesting university to watch because they have a reporting requirement in terms of the impact on their students, and they don't care about football that much. They don't need football. They don't need anything to drive admissions. They don't need anything to drive applications. They don't need sports. So here, they jump to a highly competitive sports conference, and it's going to be interesting to see if it really works for them. So.
I think if they win 6 games every year, they'll take that and cash a check.
Yeah, I doubt
I agree with you. Basketball, on the other hand, they could really turn it into a big deal again.
Yeah.
for sure in the Big Ten. Moment After Dark, one of my partners and a guy that's lurking somewhere in the comment section, a member for a month. That's nice, Moen. It's good to hear you're paying ourselves back a little bit. Wolfpack Backpack is what he's saying. So if you know what that means, we just explained it. But he's a firm believer that the North Carolina State, regardless of the ACC stuff, is going to be going to the SEC. That's his opinion.
They're not getting through TSA.
Okay.
They're not. They're going to be their sympathy animal or their emotional support animal. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Shonsky, another member, says the other thing in these teams are running off other payouts than a media deal. In 2021, BYU was only $6 million behind Utah and the sixth in the Big 12, and they were independent. Explain that. Yeah, Shonsky, I'm not sure we can answer that right now, but it is interesting that North Carolina, the school is really running some big deficits, right? They're behind. How much are they behind, Rock? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I know it wasn't as ugly as UCLA has been, but it was certainly higher, though. That's also a function of whether they want to look at things in which way. It's a choice, right, for the universities. I'm saying this with an economics finance professor on, but if they're looking at it separately versus part of the university, like what are they attributing costs to versus like what is the marketing arm of an athletics department and the brand value it brings to get people in the door. I guess it's really every budget is a choice of how you want to represent things, at least from my business background, but I definitely would be about Bill's take about the deficit and how they look at it.
Yeah, every university's got a different business case, and they've got a different starting point. Oregon State's got $1 billion budget. Washington's got $5 billion budget. Washington doesn't really need applicants. Oregon State's been doing a big online program that you probably don't need football to drive online admissions.
Right.
So every university's got a different business case for chasing this money, and for some, they might have got swept up in it. Like I think UCLA got swept up on it, and probably wasn't the best business case for them.
I don't think people. UCLA was a +1, so
yeah, they were. Yeah, I'm sure the ADs get all excited because that's great for them because in their career, they've got a better spot on the resume because they're in a power conference or a Big Ten.
Oh yeah,
but the chancellor, the president of the university, they've got to put the brakes on some of this stuff.
Jamie Thornton, who we love here, SEC, Arkansas, Wolfpack Backpack. Seriously, you guys need to make those. Okay, Moen, are you watching? Moen is going to take care of that for you, Jamie. Send him a DM on Twitter, and we'll work on getting some Wolfpack Backpacks out there. I'm not sure. Did we ever talk about that, Moen? I can't remember if that was in a conversation we talked about in the past or not. Anyway, I think that's funny. All right, go ahead. You have something else?
It's going to be a UNC backpack, and inside there's going to be a wolf hiding in there. Is that the concept?
I don't know. It's not something I'm designing. Evidently, Jamie and Moen are going to design it. I know Ute has some ideas.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk Florida State. Let's get off North Carolina by itself. And Bill, if we're out of your area of expertise, certainly you don't have to get into this. But right now, Florida State is at the top of the list for realignment. You know that they're suing the ACC along with Clemson. Now Greg Pflugar, peek around the corner, who we love, the OG of reporting for realignment, says his money perch, in other words, the guy he's got, his man in the papers for North Carolina, Florida State, is actually saying Florida State might be paying a higher dollar amount to get out quickly, to leave the ACC sooner than later. I'm not sure if you caught the episode that you put together that explained generally how much money each school would need to contribute for a buyout for the ACC to stay viable.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, you did see it. Okay, and it's way it's north of 300 million. I can't remember 320 or something.
Yeah.
If Florida State is considering paying an amount, and it's reported it might be higher, what's your guess that amount would be?
I don't know that can't guess on the amount. I don't want to guess on that, but I have been following their financing and some of the moves they've been making with their bond issues. They did 2 of the 3 bond issues that they kind of teed up early in the year, and they've got about 170 million left in bonding authority that's been approved. In the first 2 that they did, it was interesting that they reduced an amount that they needed, that they had projected for their football operations facility, which kind of tells me that they brought a partner in, and they might have saved some money there. So they're saving that last bond issue, I think, because they could have put that out to the market with these other 2 a couple weeks ago. So they're holding on to one bond issue. It was going to be for refinancing debt, but they might be doing some things behind the scene to where they can use that last bit of bonding capacity to address this fee.
Rock, what do you think? What do you think the amount is that Florida State may pay, and what do you think the amount needs to be for the ACC to stay alive?
Well, I don't think the ACC is going to get the amount that you walk through that's going to let them stay alive. It's more, to me, I think it's going to get one that makes them be able to stay alive in a different form, right? Like to be made whole for the remainder of these 9 years. I just don't. That would require FSU paying the full boat, right? And Clemson to do that, right? That's the only way that happens. And you start a negotiation with your nuts version, right? And you try to get somewhere else. So even if they get something really good, even if Florida State thought that $250 to $300 million was worth it, they have to run those calculations. If you listen to Greg's show tonight and his Money Perch guy, they're basically making the guess that although it's a large expense and it's a large item over multiple years, that broadly across the university, from applications to what it could do for various academic and other athletic programs, and just the brand being able to accelerate past what it already is good at, that it is worth it, that they come out on the positive side, even if they overpay. I think that their strategy makes a lot of sense to me. Like, they seem to be all in, and they don't care which road happens first. If it's paying more to get out because they've done their version of the math, fine. Or if they can leverage the courts or get an amazingly fast judgment, seems either way that they're going down that road. But that was basically the summation of what Greg's conversation was that they're willing to pay more than all of our conjectures have been. It still may not be as high, though, as what you does run the numbers on. I guess we'll see in time.
Okay. You want to add anything to that, Bill?
No, Utes. I got a peek at Utes numbers before he presented them. He had me look at them.
Oh, good.
They make sense to me, but boy, those are huge numbers.
They are. I mean, we know now private equity is now embedded in college sports with the news that's come out this week. This new Drew Weatherford organization. Do you know what that is? I know he's a trustee at Florida State. Obviously you played football at Florida State. Do you know much about this organization he's built to provide private equity money to, they said, upward of maybe 50 schools?
So I don't believe any of it. So what he represents to me is a salesperson who went around the country, and he was looking for somebody that had contract authority to enter into a bad deal to borrow money from them. But some of the comments in that article were just ludicrous. The idea, we don't care when you pay back. We're not going to oversight. All this stuff. It sounded like, yeah, we're just giving away free money and you guys just do what you do. And, it's ludicrous. The private equity has just no match for the bonding capacity that universities have, their financial balance sheets, the states behind them. I mean, Florida State's going to be borrowing at 4%. That little teeny piece that they're using a private equity partner for their marketing piece to maybe do concerts and sell maybe concessions. I mean, they're bringing in maybe $3 million or 3% of a $100 million enterprise. And that private equity group is going to add management expertise, and maybe they'll get a 20-30% of return on that $3 million. But the notion that a public university or a private university that can borrow at 3 or 4% is going to want to borrow 50, 60 million at 20% is ridiculous. That makes no sense at all. So I was really floored that some of these beat reporters are not pushing back or not fact checking some of these claims that these folks are making. I mean, this just sounds like a bunch of loan sharks that are out there, and people, they call them private equity, but
Right.
I don't believe any of it. So
Is it possible? Oh, I'm sorry, Bill. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask,
is it possible that it's coming through because a lot of the athletic departments have had to do all their own raising and financials outside of the overall athletic department? I don't know Florida State's specific example. Or is it just another way of big donors to figure out a way to take a loss and do a tax write-off in a world where NIL wasn't letting them do that?
No, you could do the same. You have big investors in the bond market, in the public bond market, buying bonds. They'll buy bonds, taxable bonds, and they'll get a write-off, and they'll take they'll pay a higher return, but they'll get a tax deduction. There's all sorts of schemes you can do in the public financing world for high wealth, high net worth investors. So the university, and I'm sure this is the athletic department folks talking with these guys, and they're completely cordoned off from the actual finance experts in the universities, because those experts and all the bond financing experts that they have, if they were in the room, they would be shooting down these ideas. So I think the athletic directors are panicked. They don't want to lose their empires. They know that it's going to be tough to go to their president and get money or bonding capacity. And so they're thinking, well, maybe there's some magic beans that we can bring to the table, and here's a person with magic beans, so we'll talk to them. But it's not going to go anywhere. It'll go in very strategic pieces, like Florida State. It will go. They have a health partner that's working on their operations facility that's going to have kind of a medical component to it, a rehab component for the athletes. That's also going to operate as a private activity for the community. So it's kind of a real estate healthcare investor that's going to run part of the building, and that's going to write down some of their costs. But that's like $50 million for that operating real estate piece, probably a couple $1 million a year rent or cost for that. But nothing like this, nothing like what was put in that article. I spit out my coffee when I read that. I thought, how can you?
I was going to ask you something else. I think Chad Bracey has a good question. How does this all end? But I want to get back to that for a second. You're catching me off guard a little bit. I would have been prepared for this if I was thinking that it needed to have pushback, because it came out yesterday to national acclaim.
I know.
Nobody said anything. So this
bring
sounds
in you.
like,
Where's you? Bring in you. I want you.
Well, I mean, if he was here, you guys could talk about actually what needs to be measured.
Yeah.
Because Ute is a banker.
Yeah.
He knows all the back end for this stuff. And he didn't send me a note saying, this looks like a bunch of hooey. Otherwise, we would have been doing a show on that right after it came out.
Well, some of the quotes, and maybe I'll do it too. I'll take some of the quotes, because some of the quotes are just absolutely absurd. The notion, like, we don't, when you pay it back, we don't, we're not going to be part of the management. Just that, it made no sense. And if they would have had somebody from the public finance side talking about an alternative structures for finding, 20, 30, $40 million.
Right.
And I think we had a conversation about this on one of your shows. The university assets are so tangled up, and it's so hard to lift them and get them out of the public sector's hand and into a private equity's hands, because they want to be able to foreclose on that and take over that asset from you. They want your football stadium.
That's
and they want to force you to buy it back and go to the state government and get money to buy it back after they foreclosed on you.
Right.
So it's a tangled mess when you try to get that type of money. Now, university medical centers have been doing some of this on their campuses, where they've ground leased properties to private equity firms to do buildings, but they own the ground, and they're never giving away that ground. And that private equity company owns a building, leases it out, maybe some to the university, some to the private sector. And the university just takes the ground lease money. And if that property fails, they don't subordinate their land interest to that private equity group that's got the building. You know, the universities have got to protect their land assets. You know, you can't give away your land assets, your facilities when you're a public entity like that. So there's nothing really of value to give these private equity people as collateral.
Okay. Well, I think that's something I'm going to bring up with you, because if it actually is more hokum than it is concrete, I think that's something we want to report on, because it seems to me like that's an untapped wellspring of information that people just sort of took. And honestly, I mean, it was ESPN, Yahoo Sports,
I know.
everybody was repeating it, which gave it gravitas, right? It made it feel strong. And now I'm hearing it might be a house of cards, and that just really surprises me.
Well, I mean, it's one person going around talking to people, and then you have a couple of one athletic director was talking about, it was just a ludicrous statement about how this was just the magic, you know, that was going to help them solve their problems. It's like it's hard money. Like, remember the money store? Remember that from days way time ago? You know, I mean, it's basically, you know, 20% loans.
Oh yeah, the payday loans, right?
Yeah, I mean, universities have got incredible balance sheets, great financing cost, and I have to admit, I was part of when I first left the public sector, I was involved in a deal with the University of Nevada, Reno, where a guy brought me in as a finance guy. He was a contractor, and we said, hey, we're going to go pitch this deal to the university where we could build this facility for them. And we'll run the numbers, and we'll do it with private money. And I was running the numbers, and I said, this doesn't make, I don't know, because I came from the public sector. I said, this is kind of dicey. Oh, they'll, you know, if it fails, they'll cover it, and they'll make up the difference. Don't worry. When universities fail, they always figure out a way to cover their problems.
Right.
And so, you know, we kept on going, and then it got too sketchy for me, so I bailed. And the project ended up failing. The university president got canned because of it. It was just a total nightmare for them. But I was clear of the shrapnel.
I like that.
Yeah.
Very good. Rock, let's give him one more question, and then we will let Bill go. I'm going to give you the final question. Give something that you think the world wants to hear from Bill.
I think the same question that everyone who comes on this show or comes into these channels and chats is both based off of expertise and based off of information available, and just like your gut, like where do you think this ends in the ACC generally for those schools, but just broadly, FSU, Clemson, if you were having to place your bets down on somewhere that we won't hold you to because you'll be on the show again. Where do you feel it is as we hit into June of 2024?
Yeah, so I think, Florida State is gone. Clemson, if someone will have them, you know, I'm not sure of that, if someone will have them. And I see that kind of as the end of it. And then people start to make decisions on their Olympic sports in terms of right sizing their organizations.
Right.
And the Big Ten and the SEC will keep their 35 teams. The Big 12 and the ACC will probably keep, you know, 15 teams, 20 teams, and then the G5 will probably have 5 or 6. You know.
Yeah.
To me, that's kind of the way it's going to all end up. And then you'll still have the same competitive football. I think across that top 60. I don't think the competitive landscape is going to change that much, because I think the money will get basically, you're just going to drop all the non-revenue producing sports, and then if you need any extra money, you're going to be able to go to the state, and you'll be able to get funding for the state to fill up any gaps, for like an Oregon State. The people at the bottom, kind of in that 50 to 60 range,
right?
They're probably going to get public help to keep competing.
Yeah, that sounds right to me as well. Bill, tell everybody what you do. Why are you here with us tonight? Why do we lean on you for your expertise?
Well, I about 5 years or 10 years ago, actually, I retired, and I've been just writing. And I first started writing history articles in a book, and then got my dissertation, and I've been writing academic articles. The last one was on university financing, and just kind of in this space is so, you get so much feedback on this space when you write about college financing and sports financing. And so I've just been enjoying getting feedback, more feedback than I've got on any other topic. So when I write about the Legislative Reform Act of 1947, not, pretty much crickets, but when you write about stuff that's going on in college sports, you get a lot of good feedback and got a lot of ideas on how to probe and study things. So it's just kind of a hobby for me.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on and explaining some of these higher detailed financing things. I think as we get closer with North Carolina, a little bit farther down the road, and we really see what they're going to put their attention to more. Is it perception, right? Bragging rights, or is it, hey, our tax base, and it's a money question? And every state will have to make that same determination.
Yeah, and I'll go through that that article that came out about the equity, and that would be great. I'll just kind of pull out the statements that I thought were ludicrous, and I'll tag Wild Ute, and maybe we could go back and forth on which is I would love to do that. Yeah, most audacious statement in that group. And then I just think it would be interesting because the guy, they made it out to be like this was solid gold. And I will say I did something on a very small scale similar. So when I went to the private sector, I had a partner that was a construction company, and they want to invest in real estate. So they said, hey, you can have $10 million to go do in small infill projects. This was 20, 30 years ago. So we were just talking about a 10,000 square foot building or 20,000 square foot building. But I could go then to a city and I could say, well, I've got this $5 million cash. Well, I could really borrow probably 20 million. So I've got $25 million of capital to build a small infill project in your community. I couldn't write a check that day for 25 million. I have to go to the capital source and say, hey, here's the criteria. Here's the deal. Does it fit all your criteria? Will you fund it? And they'll say, okay, we'll fund it in pieces. It's a very complicated process. So people that say, oh, I've got $5 billion, nobody has cash sitting idly by, just ready to plunk in 200 million here and $200 million there. People have their money at work. If you bring them a great deal, you'll find the money. You don't have to say you've got 5 billion. You don't have to say you've got 20 billion. Right. If you find a great deal from a university who's willing to borrow $20 million from you at 20% interest, I could go find somebody today. I mean, this is not that difficult. When you get a great deal, the money follows. Well, we'll have to see what that great deal looks like for the ACC.
I know my great deal. I'm investing in popcorn to watch Bill's mentions from the Florida State family, who's really on the private equity.
I am very looking forward to that.
I've been on their shows, and I think they're very focused. The Florida State is very focused on. They've got 3 different business lines, because I've gone through all just the redacted documents. They've got 3 distinct business lines. They've got a hotel partner, potentially, that medical rehab office component, and they've got this marketing piece. Very targeted private equity. They started, the communication from those folks at the very beginning was very broad. It was. But it got narrow over like 6 months. It got very narrow and very focused. And that's what happened, private equity companies, and says we can do this, and then you get your experts on board. Pretty soon you got a real narrow piece where they're providing expertise, a little piece of money, and they're not getting all in your business.
Or 10 to 20%.
Yeah, I mean they're getting if they sign that deal for their marketing, right, they're going to get 20, 30, 40% return on the $3 million, but Florida State on their $97 million piece is going to get 15, 20%. So they're just not going to get as much as the managing partner, but they're going to get a good return on it. So I'm good with. I think Florida State's doing it the right way. They're nowhere near the type of deal that was pitched by this person.
Okay. Well, put the
A
time
Florida
in
State
and then
guy.
let us know.
Yeah.
A Florida State guy. That's the
It was
interesting
Drew
part, right?
Rutherford. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bill. We
Okay.
really appreciate you
Very
giving
good.
us some time tonight.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Okay, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
There you go.
We need to clap him out because I don't have a sounder. Thank you very much, Bill. Bill Farley, Ph.D. Let me post the link again to his article. I want to make sure everybody knows what we've been talking about. We are talking money. Money matters. It doesn't all relate directly to the bottom line of sports, but I tell you what, if there's a tax, sorry, that's the wrong thing. If there's a tax base that normally goes to keep your local Dairy Queen alive, and you need that money for your freeway system, and that money's gone because they moved to the Big Ten, some people could be upset about that, right?
They absolutely could, but at least I know now when when you look in the back of your door where all of that money in your hotel room is actually going, and so at a minimum, I learned that today.
All right, well, let's get to some comments. Let's get first of all, wait a second. Was there any takeaways there you wanted to talk about before we started doing Q&A?
I love knowing that there are people who are focusing on this to educate us so that even so we can have informed takes in other places we're having the conversation, right? Like none of us have to be the expert that he is or the drop that you is, but I'm amazed by the community and how everybody absorbs this stuff in a way that makes us more educated when you go into other shows, other channels, or online, just what others don't really know. And so much seeps into everyone. So I really appreciate that opportunity to have him on, and also his take of just it's a Florida State Clemson thing. I don't know whether he wasn't expanding further out, but I always like to hear everybody's different takes with what they hope will happen, especially neutral people that probably don't have a horse in the race, so to speak, at least I'm
Right.
aware of. So
He's actually not tied to down there at all. We first introduced to him when we were talking just private equity in general, when that first balloon idea came out 6-7 months ago. That's how we got acquainted. And then we just sort of stayed in contact. He is, just to answer a couple questions, let me bring this comment up right now. He's wearing an Iowa State hat because he's a grad of Iowa State. He's an OSU, and that would be Oregon State University graduate. And he's been in the finance field for a lot longer than most people have been watching this have been alive. So he's definitely an expert in his field. And while some of the data might be a little too granular for you, the big idea is his focus is on the tax revenue and what that's tied to. That's tied to the finances for the ACC, which is tied into the North Carolina school system. And if they change conferences, it's not just one thing that it affects. It affects hundreds of ancillary things.
And I did think his answer on, his questioning of the private equity was about the most CFB Mafia answer you could get. Because all it makes me think of is like Goodfellas when they get into the restaurant and they're investing and don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. And then when they don't make the profit, they just take the guy's place and burn the rest down on their wake, even though they said they were going to be good partners. So be careful of everybody saying they'll give you a lot of money and don't worry about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've just been seeing in back and forth. We've been talking about creators and different people that are out in the social media field. The one that's been talked about here, no, I'm not going to name him, is not somebody that we count as trustworthy around here. And I would just tell you to really concentrate when you're looking at sources and find out what people's hidden agendas might be. And that particular one has a lot of hidden agendas, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say. So you guys make up your own minds, but when we have people we collaborate with, we use their names, like Greg Flugar. Go ahead.
I have a PG comment on that I'd like to add on.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes people like someone who's mentioning another creator that I actually watch and like, except for when that other person is on. And I would just say, watch Greg's rant, and I endorse it. Greg never rants. My nickname is RockAndRant, so I do. But Greg is generally a pretty kind person, and I co-sign and knight him rant of the day for what he said, and that's about it.
Let's put up this banner again, because I think this is the one most people came to see that weren't tied to what we were originally talking about at the beginning of the show with Bill Farley. Again, Bill Farley, I posted his link in the comment section. I recommend everybody go out and follow him on Twitter and really engage. He's very engaging. If you have finance questions, you want to know more about private equity, he will answer questions. So anyways, very trustworthy source. So let's get here. I've got a bunch of comments that we've marked. They're not in order, so I might come across some that might not mean anything this second, but since they were marked, I bring them up. Don't hang me out to dry for it. It's just, this is how we're going to do it tonight. If you have a comment that you want us to read, and we've got about maybe a half hour's all of Q&A coming up, please make it a super chat. Otherwise, it's not going to jump out to me. Okay, we're just being very open and honest with everybody. So we're going to start with Georgia Tech and Syracuse. That's your drinking game words of the night. If you have a legal beverage, feel free to tip it back and drink safely and don't drive after the show. If you're driving right now listening, do not drink. So we'll just be out front about that. All right, let's start at the top. First, we want to start with Clint Moses, who says whiskey bottle Mafia Georgia Tech drink. So there you go. There's some more Georgia Tech. And Syracuse is the other super chat word that, not super chat, but word we started using for drinking game. Stephen Vitt says, in other words, the state of North Carolina outstretched itself in terms of spending and investments. What do you think about that one, Ron?
I think that they might have, but again, like for me, when it comes to money in a university or a business, it's your decision about what you want to say caps for and how you want to spend the money, right? So if they decided, if they had a surplus somewhere else, they could wipe it away. It just depends upon how they're accounting for it. And I use the example, if you're in a company and the marketing department actually stays on budget and the sales department blows it out, your company's still in debt, right? And if you wanted to blend it out, you can adjust things on the fly. I know every state might have a little bit different way they deal with state entities, so I'm saying something broad, but I'm not sure, I guess, is my point. Sitting with UCLA, but at least that system we know has had a lot of financial problems just because of other reasons. I'm not sure if I feel comfortable going further on the UNC side. Justin might be able to give us a different take if he's still in chat.
Justin, if you're there, yeah, watch for his chat, because I was actually going to try to flag you down to join the show. Justin, if you're out there, send me a DM on Twitter or just poke a comment right here. I'd love to have you on if you have a few minutes. I wanted to follow up on some of that news that came out tonight from Greg, if you want to join us. So send me a DM on Twitter or just leave a comment and Rock will tell me and we'll bring you in. Actually, I'll just do this, make it simple. I'm going to send you an invite, and you're welcome to join us if you want to. Justin is the man. And he's a North Carolina State homer, and that's all that matters in this conversation right now. There's your invitation, Justin. Appreciate it. All right. Don in Kansas, why don't you read that one, Rock? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry,
I'm always trying to make sure I don't cut you off.
You're fine. Go ahead.
Twitter X for the first time. Holy cow, what a wealth of information. That would be my sentiments exactly. I think that I've seen Bill earlier when I first probably came across his channel at some point. I want to say I remember seeing him, but seeing his socials when Bomber pointed it out was super enlightening and became an instant follow. I suggest if you're into the weeds like we all are in this subject, that you might want to follow him.
Very good. And you have our great thanks for being with us tonight, Bill. Thank you. Let's see here. RT, another member, says, seems like this is an argument for North Carolina Board of Governors pushing for remaining in the ACC. Well, I don't know that he doesn't have he has no rooting interest. So he has nothing invested in the state of North Carolina to want one thing or the other. He's just saying from a pure economic base, especially from the sales tax thing, 5% is a lot. They would lose money. Even though they get a lot more to be in the Big Ten, in the long run, they'd lose more because they wouldn't have all those things associated with the ACC, or at least that's what he contends. Rock?
Yeah, I think the interesting part is what he said when you take what we have seen in some of the conversations with the Board of Trustees and Board of Governors is like very interesting. Like we don't know that is or isn't at play. But the next sequencing of events that could happen in the politics of North Carolina as it reveals itself in days, weeks, and months may make it be like we just found out something really interesting that we probably wouldn't have necessarily thought of. I definitely did not have the North Carolina tourism on my realignment bingo card.
Right. I tell you what, I wouldn't take anything off of the North Carolina bingo card for realignment. I think you could put truck stops on there. You could put deep sea fishing. I think everything is involved with North Carolina. I thought Washington was intertwined with politics and stuff, and it is bad, but it's nothing like this North Carolina stuff. I'm just shocked by where that's at right now. Thank you for that super chat or comment. Appreciate it. Chad Bracey, another member, says, my concern is that leverage is there to get the ACC to bite on the money now and not wait. So Chad is saying the money's big. They're floating an idea. The money X, the ACC might just want to take the money and run. What do you think about that, Rock?
I think that the more that we keep hearing random information from some people connected directly as opposed to just us talking among ourselves,
Right.
I think it's just like chafing the sky because they're trying to figure out a negotiation of some sort. There's just so much going on right now, and it just feels like when you least expect it kind of moment, especially with these other cases coming to a head in some form, not like 100%. We still have the NLRB, a couple of other things out there, but I don't know. It'd be one of those things you wake up and all of a sudden, our friend Greg is on at 6 a.m. because something happened overnight and we had no idea.
Right. Well, certainly we don't put any contacts we have up against what Greg's got. He's insiders all over the place. My opinion is, and it might be lone wolf at this point, but my opinion is that I think a lot of the news that Greg gets is for a reason. People have a message they want to communicate out, and that doesn't mean it's wrong. I want to be very clear. Just because they're trying to get a message out and Greg reports it doesn't mean it's inaccurate. But I do believe that people there's a lot of machinations. A lot of different people want a lot of different things. And in my opinion, floating ideas like that with not tied to specific dollars is I don't know. I just question it a little bit. The timing is a little bit off for me too. Here we had all this college, all this settlement talk, and then out of the blue comes something from a booster or a money guy at Florida State. I know Florida State's getting tired of all the hassle. Don't get me wrong. I understand what's going on down there, but I just find it hard to believe they're going to write let's say some crazy number, 400 million plus to leave the ACC. I cannot see that. So
yeah, I didn't take that personally. I didn't take it personally as that would be the number from what I heard. I think to me, I heard, and this is just me putting my own views and absorbing all of our conversations of, well, maybe it's not the 150 to 200 million that we bandy about that everybody thinks that Florida State would do in a second. It's probably, I didn't think of it as the 400 million one. So maybe it's the Goldilocks is 250 to 300, sure, because we have extrapolated some other value. I also don't necessarily think it's going to happen. I just mean in the scheme of things, I also wouldn't be surprised if I woke up one morning and something had broken. I still think there's more time personally. If you ask me to, what my take is, that I think if it gets closer to February of next year is where things break through more, or whenever ESPN makes a decision, or if the Attorney General case in Florida moves forward faster, that could be more of an accelerant to something, but we shall see.
Yeah, the court cases is a wild card. And unless there is a settlement, that's a ticking time bomb still in the background. North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, those are all court cases that are going, and some of them are going at faster tempo than others. So we'll have to see, but it's a lot of fun to watch. Boy, I am just enamored of how all this works. Really, really intriguing, some of the stuff we've had a chance to talk about, right? I really appreciate that. Here's a comment from Kaylani L. And I better get a award if I read that right. Kaylani, I think is how you say that. I don't think it's Kaylani, but Kelani, please let me know if I have that right or not. Lots of donations to the athletic department are linked to those non-revenue sports. More than a few hedge fund billionaires have field hockey playing daughters. Okay. Again, we don't know what school is going to drop what sports. Of course, anything could, somebody could write a check and underwrite an entire department in the athletic department. It's absolutely true. But there is going to be some serious number crunching to figure out what these schools can do to maybe not get rich with this media money, but not lose a ton of money.
Right, and I also don't think that to use that example, the women's field hockey team is the likely first one to go. It would be the men's rowing team,
Right.
even
Right.
if they have an investor, because we still don't know how it all plays with the Title IX situation and the
Yep.
football numbers impacting that directly. But the post is very true. I mean, you can have, I'm sure the lacrosse team for North Carolina, well, not that I think that would go away in any way of those, because they're just such a historic, or Duke specifically, probably even more so. They definitely have earmarked donations that are there to support those programs. Some schools even have endowed coaches in certain seats like that. So Wild West will happen from that for sure. But some people are going to lose teams. There's just no way it's not going to happen. It may not be the Power Two, but it's definitely going to be somewhere in the G5 and those in between.
Conundrum. Appreciate you being here tonight, Conundrum. Good to see you. Non-revenue sports will turn into club sports. That's what I said specifically. No Title IX, no equality. Where do we go with Title IX?
I don't know that in 2024, and again, I'm not trying to get into one political side or the other. I don't know how in this era, especially in this moment, that you just gut women's sports and ignore that. Like, I just don't see how you take a ton of that away at this particular time, when in general, optically and in reality, women's sports is on the ascendancy. It's not just the Caitlin Clark effect. It's Nebraska selling out a stadium for volleyball matches. It's a softball tournament on ESPN. They're all drawing record stuff. So like, I don't know that it's like all going to club or all staying. I'm not sure, but I highly doubt that women's sports are going to get completely gutted on a Title IX level, and that would stand in a lot of places in America this year.
Very good. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Sheep and wolf's clothing. I would buy a Wolfpack backpack and wear it to work. Just make Ramses really big. Is Ramses the name of the Wolfpack dog? I'm not sure who Ramses is.
So I guess the
Anyway,
question is
go
it
ahead.
a blue backpack? Is it a UNC backpack that there's a NC State element to it in the bag, or is it an NC State one that
Okay, so that's a
UNC
good
has to
question.
wear?
So what I've seen has been a UNC Ram with a backpack that's, I believe, UNC colors with a Wolfpack in it. Or sorry, with a the sheepdog or whatever. You know what I'm talking about, a wolf in the backpack. However, I could see it the opposite way. I could see where it's a backpack made out of wolf packs. So dogs. I don't know. You'll have to ask Ute. I will try to remember to ask him the question. If I forget, Rock, you can ask him.
I
But it
don't
is a
think we'll
good
be
question.
sourcing this out of North Carolina, but maybe there's a manufacturer that we can find.
I think we need to get on it and start selling these things. People want it really, really bad. Let's see here. Mr. Ed Wayner, another member, says, would the state of North Carolina make more tax revenue from traveling fans of the remaining ACC schools visiting North Carolina in an ACC without Florida State and Clemson? More teams have a chance to win, spurring more travel. That's certainly one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, if the ACC doesn't have Clemson and Florida State, how many people are really watching those teams play football?
Yeah, that's the question of is the championship game enough for schools that may get access to it to attend? It's not like that championship game in Charlotte has sold out every year, even when the teams were going great and before this was going on. It has not had the success of some of the other championship games in terms of attendance all the time.
All right, that's a good answer. Mr. Ed Wayner, thank you very much, Ed. Good to see you here. Let me bring off, here's another. This just came out, was just released. Ross Dellinger put it out, and I'm going to make it big so everybody can see it. This is a statement from the president of Notre Dame. Let me get this comment so everybody can see it off. Get that there. And I quote, he says, the settlement, though undesirable in many respects and promising only temporary stability, is necessary to avoid what would be the bankruptcy of college athletics. We're talking about primarily the players and the NIL. We're talking $3 billion almost a settlement. To save the great American institution of college sports, Congress must pass legislation that will preempt the current patchwork of state laws, establish that our athletes are not employees but students seeking college degrees, and provide protection from further antitrust suits that will allow colleges to make and enforce rules that will protect our student athletes and help ensure competitive equity among teams. So Notre Dame, you can't get much bigger than that. On top of that, it's Notre Dame, and it's Notre Dame. So I don't know. Maybe. What do you think?
I mean, if I was on the your guys' show the other night, I would have been contrarian in some of the comments, in the sense of, yes, I think somebody, if you do a deal with Nike, you can't then go do a deal with Adidas, right? So your name, image, and likeness would be restricted, but that's because you signed an actual agreement kind of situation. So for these billion-dollar entities and multi-million-dollar entities who have profited merch and stuff off of that, to come out with a statement like that, I'm just not in the whole rules for thee but not for we kind of thing. I'm fundamentally against that. And if you were 20 years old and you were in a startup program at UNC, and you were able to work with the university to come up with like the next Twitter, you would profit in that really greatly. And that statement just means to me that they're obviously going to try to rely on Congress to solve the problem they still can't solve, and to try to, bring us back to whatever year you want, 2015, 2000, 2000, 1994. Kind of wild, especially after the court ruling. So what are they going to get, antitrust legislation passed to do that? That's what they'd have to do, right? And get, or some sort of rules that don't apply to most other people in their ability to make money.
We need to be very clear too. The NCAA has a $15 million budget to lobby Congress. That was just released either the last part of last week or this week. That's a lot of money to lobby Congress to get something done.
Right.
Charlie Baker's been up on Capitol Hill several times begging for oversight and control. And every time he's done that, Congress has looked down at him as, you really don't.
Right.
You if we get involved, everything changes. And they're trying to avoid that. So I don't know.
And that doesn't
Notre Dame's pretty big.
Yeah, I'm sure they have their own lobbyists, right, who are trying to advocate for them, either directly or in other consortiums they have, even though they're not in a conference. I don't know whether the Big Ten has lobbyists. ACC clearly doesn't have lobbyists that are good at anything. So I don't know that they do, but some of the other organizations, SEC and Big Ten, they might be supplementing whatever the NCAA is going after. I just don't know the answer there.
Yeah, it's quite possible. Earl Carr's in the house, fellow BYU Cougar. How you doing, Earl? Says sup bomber. Appreciate you saying hi. Thanks for being here, Earl. Let's see here. Chad Bracey says, as in, what if the ACC were to refuse to sell media rights at any cost just to be dicks? I'm not sure what you'd gain from that. What would you gain from that?
A meme? I mean, I don't know.
That's funny. I mean, that's pretty funny.
Losing all of our rights to own the Knowles, like what is
right?
Either way, you're screwed, right? Like I mean, anything's possible, but that's if Jim Phillips should be doing stuff to represent some portion of his conference membership, right?
Well, you'd think.
At some point, it might be nice to do that. And in that case, at a minimum, I mean, if he's only representing the best interests of the Wake Forest or Boston College or whoever you want to put in the have or have nots world, hopefully they'd come up to something, because I'd rather have 100%, 60% of 150 million than 100% of my pride.
Yep. 100% of nothing. Yep. Conundrum says, NCAA, we admit we're thieves. I like that. That's funny. Thank you, Conundrum. That was funny. Let's get back up to some of these other comments. Kendon Shirley. It's been a minute, Kendon. Good to see you. Oregon State has 22 out of the 65 P5 schools back in 2022 for research dollars. We're talking about Oregon State again. Eugene does about half the research Oregon State does. I will tell you right now, Oregon does less research than I think any school in the top 322. It's ridiculous. But because they started the AAU, they get to be part of it. So
yeah, they have. It's like one of the founding members of the Big Ten that's not super competitive in sports. Like, founding has its privileges, and I think that's also just the Oregon State. I always feel bad when they come up, but one of Moen's future alternative realities should be: what if the current commissioner of what is the Pac-12, the Pac-2, had been hired 10 years ago, I
Oh
bet
boy.
you there'd be a lot different outcome.
I tell you what, if Gloria Alvarez is the the commissioner for the Mountain West, if they'd had her for the last 12 years, the Pac-12 would be somewhere way different. Daniel Gygax says, how much money did North Carolina pay the ACC to move from Greensboro to Charlotte? Do you remember that number?
I do not. I do
It's
not know that answer.
15 million. 15 million they paid.
That's like, it's interesting to move to make that move. Whether they pays out for them in the future, I guess we'll see. Depends upon how well the ACC sustains this current onslaught.
It will. You're very, very accurate. Stephen Vitt says, I still believe UNC goes to the SEC even after all this chaos. I think they go to the SEC. I just don't think they take North Carolina State with them. Where do you sit with that?
I think that I both think and hope they go to the SEC because of just theoretical domino effects on where other schools go. I don't know on the NC State one. I think I would probably answer that question every single show differently because it just goes back and forth for me.
Well, that's fun.
Today,
you can go ahead and do that.
today I would be on they're sticking together, whether they're stuck in North Carolina together with Tobacco Road Reimagined, or they're going to the SEC. But that is probably the thing I have no idea because it just has changed so much over the last few weeks with these different courtroom and boardroom dramas.
Yeah. Timothy Green, another member, says, I think Florida State was treated wrongly last year. They should have been able to have a chance to play in the national championship game, in my opinion, certainly to make it to the Final Four. They were undefeated. They were power conference. They won their conference tournament championship game. There's no reason. Who cares who's hurt? The fact that you're taking subjectiveness and putting it on top of an objective measurement, that's what blew it off. And that's why I think that Florida State will never go to the SEC because of ESPN. That's just my opinion. Justin Lucas, this was a while ago. The ACC's projections have the 67 NC championships through 2031 as generating $430 billion. Is that right?
There was a follow-up start thing in there where
it had to be million.
If he meant million, then I was a wise guy and said, well, Justin's won 1,000 Powerballs. That's why. Okay. So it is a 430 million in economic development. I guess that was at 31 would mean 6 years. So 430 million, you do the math from their press conference announcing the sites. So yeah, I mean, again, this is real money, right? But I don't think that's what people are voting for. I don't think it's the money. Money is the excuse, in my opinion. It's a measuring stick. I don't think that's why when you put people and they have to do a vote one way or the other, they're going to vote perception, in my opinion. If they have an opportunity to be at the highest level, that invitation is there, and all they have to do is ask for it. Go ahead, Rock. No, I think that these schools want to be around life schools, though I don't think it's, out of the question that they reimagine what the conference is with, the private school model, or in combination with some of these prestigious, public Ivies like UNC that Immaculate in the past has talked about.
Right.
I don't necessarily foresee it, but it's not, to me, out of the question. So we'll see. This will be the case study, the lab rat of what state could do the most politics around conference realignment and all of this stuff as it goes. And it's giving us a lot of stuff to talk about every day.
It is. I love it. Just a couple more questions, and I think we're getting it out of here. If you want your comment to be read, we are shutting the show down. Make it a super chat, and I'll get it in right now. Just don't want you to think I'm avoiding anybody. We're just 2 hours goes and comes pretty fast. A couple more comments here. The Chad says, I love this. Let FSU and Clemson out of the ACC. I don't know about let them out, but certainly make it affordable. Anyway, 80 to 150 is affordable in my opinion, but I don't know. Let's see. Illini Ted says Big Ten Academic Alliance is a collaboration of all member schools to share resources and libraries to collaborate on funded research. They have gotten over $9.8 billion with this. And I would add, part of the reason that Stanford didn't go to the Big Ten is because they aren't willing to share their library. with the Big Ten.
Absolutely. And the only thing that I brought up is, I mean, I think it was probably being on one of these shows on this channel where someone was talking, when Nebraska was are they going to get kicked out Big Ten moment, someone had brought up that they didn't necessarily feel like Nebraska has benefited from that, but I also don't know that they were in a position to know that either. But that's the only reason why I asked that. Or if Bill knew, like, what happened, like, does that really, is there a lift if you're Cal and UCLA coming in, Washington and Oregon, even though you have, in some cases, excellent research, can you still expect a multiplier of some degree because of that other part? Because math is math at the end. It's all these schools are going to look at everything from the financial to the brand.
Yeah, and I don't think he's looked at that at all, which is why when that came up, I could tell he's done the other math on the other stuff that he talked about, but he definitely has that in his head now. So there's a way. There hasn't been one realignment move that's been done on education by itself, right? Research doesn't get you an invitation to a conference. It's a nice
It's really
ad.
a Big Ten thing, really,
It's,
right? Like,
yeah,
that I know of.
yeah, it's not a Big 12 thing. It's certainly not an SEC thing. So yeah, I just don't, the research dollars is great. It's a good bragging thing. Certainly in the Big Ten, they like to brag about stuff like that. But at the end of the day, bragging doesn't win football games. And that's what these other conferences are focusing on. Just a couple more here. Let's see. Stephen Vitt says money being more of a driver than what actually happens on the field is at the heart of the problem. Money, I think, is the root of the problem, but I don't think it's driving the decision. I think what's driving the decision is access, and that's the SEC and the Big Ten. That's my opinion.
It's the competitive landscape that has gotten to this point, regardless of whether it makes sense to all of us who enjoy the regionality of sports and the occasional big cross-conference rivalry game.
Absolutely true. Last but not least, one more comment from Jamie Thornton. Thanks for being here tonight, Jamie. The backpack is going to come with extra cheese for Greg. I love that. Moen was here. I think he heard your cries, so we'll probably be having a meeting and deciding whether we want to do something with the backpack idea. I think it's certainly fun, and we appreciate everybody being involved. Rock, why don't you tell everybody kind of as we go? We have a show tomorrow night. I'm not sure if I got to talk. Are you? You're at work normally when we start that show, right?
Yeah, it's a little rough one, but we'll see. Okay. We can talk about it offline.
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine. Go ahead and tell everybody what you're thinking tonight.
Yeah, listen, I'm thinking that between the settlement coming to pass and people thinking that it's the end of all of that, when it's just the beginning of what's going to follow and the fallout from those agreements and what we're going to see over the next few months, and whether or not the news that Greg had today about the Florida money purchase, that they might be willing to pay more to get out as they can currently go through the legal side. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. I think that people absolutely get messages through the press, whether it's the government trying to put things out there for people to get used to an idea, or someone trying to move a conversation in alignment. So where it ultimately comes out is great. And to answer Chad's question earlier of how does this all end, I'm 100% convinced now that this has been a multi-year sim by EA for college football 25. And the only way we're going to find out what really happens is when we start to do gameplay in July.
There we go. I love it. The Matrix lives on. I appreciate everybody for being here tonight. We had a great conversation. The show was actually booked yesterday, and I was thinking, something fun to talk about, North Carolina politics and all that stuff. And then this news broke about Florida State tonight on Peek Around the Corner, Flug Empire, Greg Flugar's show. And we will be talking about that tomorrow night. I promise you. We'll be talking about Florida State and the ACC, North Carolina and the ACC probably carry the day. We'll talk some of this national settlement news that we covered at the beginning of the show. And then, of course, when other stuff pops up, we'll have that on the show tomorrow. So catch us tomorrow night for the big freaking Friday show on the College Football Mafia Network. I'm going to say we're going to sign out here for Rock and Rant. I am Nathan Bomber Brown. Everybody have a great night. Stay out of trouble. And if you've been drinking, do not drive. We'll see you later, everybody. Bye-bye. Peace.